Good afternoon and welcome to ConspiracyCon. ConspiracyCon is the best conference when it comes to international and domestic relations, world affairs, chemtrails, 9/11, all the significant things that happen to us that we know about, but more importantly, what's going on behind the curtain that we don't know about. That's what we're all about here. Brian Hall comes here every year and puts on an extraordinary conference in his dedication to this. Please give him a very wonderful hand. Mr. Brian Hall, the producer. Really hard work. His staff always puts on a great presentation and everything. So today we have Dr. A True Ott. I'm hearing incredible things about you, Doctor. He's come all the way from Utah, and we have some very interesting things here. Dr. True has a BA and a doctorate in philosophy and nutrition. He was awarded an insider course on financial markets scholarship and learned the innermost secrets of finance from John Exter, Citibank, and Paul Volcker of the Fed. It was said that when he learned about who was running America from behind the curtains, a worldwide corrupt money trust based entirely on usury and speculation. Today, Ott maintains there is a very real new order that you've heard about, designed to destroy freedom throughout the world. He is heard on his daily radio show, and he maintains a blog. You want to tune in on this. Today's presentation will be Whether or Not, the Secret World of NASA, Jet Propulsion, Weather Modification. True will prove that climate change is secretly man-made and that recent storm events such as Sandy were not natural. He will provide that while future storms will be blamed on climate change, they are the result of weather modification technology. You have just seen what's happened in Oklahoma with these global superstorms. You've seen all over the polar ice caps melting in things like Iceland at an unbelievable rate. I think you will find this a very startling and incredible presentation. Welcome the very wonderful Dr. A True Ott.
With all due respect to Sophia before me, she was a little lower, I'm a little higher. I don't know if I can reach this microphone. Oh, golly. When I look out for my friends and associates in Utah, they look at me and say, what are you doing going to a conspiracy conference? What does it profit you to do that? Okay? And so I have to ask myself, yeah, why am I here? And more importantly, I just want to start my presentation by asking each one of you out there, why are you here? I mean, seriously, let's talk philosophy. I have a PhD, that's a doctor of philosophy, and I do a lot of philosophizing. For the truth, and truly, my name is True, okay? I'm going to do a little bit of scripture reading today with you, okay? Because there's a lot of truth in that best-selling book of all time. Those of you that don't know that, that's the #1 best-selling book of all time is the Holy Bible, specifically the King James Version. There are amazing things in that book. Not top of which is, you shall know what? The truth shall set you free. Now, I am here today to tell you what's in my heart as truth, and truth being not what I believe, but what I have really found to be empirical, absolute fact. Knowing the truth shall set you free only if you have a mindset that you're not going to get upset about it and depressed about it. Okay, to know where not to put your foot, or not to step in a trap and get caught and get hurt. And that's what being free is all about, in my opinion. And wisdom is just simply applying knowledge, applying truth. So if you're not, again, this is from the Bible too, right? A guidebook, if you will. So, wow, I want to, again, just give my thanks to Brian for inviting me here. More than anything, I'm happy to be here because it is a forum. It is a way to express your thoughts and feelings, to share. That's something that's really lacking in a controlled world, isn't it? You know, I can't tell you how many press releases I put out to the mainstream media, and they're just ignored. Eyes roll back and say, you're a little bit out there, you're just not in the mainstream, but let's debate it. Let's have an open discussion. Let's see if it's factual or whether it's bogus. Now, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I admit it. I'm human. But when I do make a mistake, it's an honest mistake, I'll tell you that. And if I make an error, make a mistake, it's, again, something that I'll admit to. If I'm shown to be wrong, I'll say, whoops, and I'll try and correct the problem. One of the biggest overlapping areas for all of the world as I see it today is, there's basically 3 prongs. Call it a devil's trident. Have you ever seen what's happening in Ground Zero back in New York? The memorial that's gone on there, the visitor center, there's a huge monolith of a devil's trident. 3 prongs going into the Ground Zero, fashioned out of the scrap metal. Why would they form a devil's trident as a symbol of what happened on September 11th? Most Americans don't know that fact. But I found there's basically 3 things that this elite cabal cover and make it so very hard to break through the veneer. We talked about, of course, science a little bit, but that's what I'm going to talk about today. How they manipulate science. Okay, they manipulate religion in a major way. False religion, make you believe things are just flat out not true, and changes your paradigm. And then, of course, the media. I mean, if you can't understand the truth of what's happening, how are you ever going to make changes? So they have a 3-pronged approach, basically. Now, what I'm going to expose today really is part of a great big picture, actually. And I want to just, like anything else, I'm a goal-oriented type of person. And I like to set goals for everything, especially this presentation. Here are my goals, please. I hope I can fulfill the goals, and if you think I have, let me know. First of all, I want to document to you evidence, hard evidence, which is fact, of weather modification technology, that I call WMT, and yes, WMT technology's existing patents. Well, you can find a lot of neat things looking for patents in the patent office. Believe me, it's quite amazing. The next goal, what's the motive? What's the motivation for having a weather modification technology and deploying it? Motivation, what moves it? And of course, to identify the players involved, who's responsible for it. Now, I used to be a great skeptic. I got to tell you, I'm skeptical at heart. My mind doesn't jump on to believing just because people say it's right. I welcome skepticism. I really do. And the media especially. I want to sit down with media and say, look at the evidence. Let's debate it. Let's discuss it. What's really frustrating is when they don't even want to discuss it. Very frustrating. And this is why I'm grateful for this forum. At least it's getting out there. What all this evidence comes to be is really the so-called climate change. It is indeed man-made, folks. But it's not from fossil fuel emissions, from cars, from factories, no. But you'll see from this presentation, hopefully, that it's from weather modification technology, WMT-based experimentation and atmosphere damage. And they don't want we the people to know these things for some reason. I think it'll become self-evident why. And if I can provide at least one, wow, aha moment in any one of you out there today, it's been a success for me to say, wow, I never knew that. This is new. That's my goal. And most importantly, I got an hour and a half. If I can finish speaking before you quit listening, that's a huge success. I hope nobody starts snoring on me here. Again, the #1 best-selling book, I want to just give you a few quotes out of it. And this is from Solomon, perhaps one of the wisest, most educated men of his time or any era. Solomon in Ecclesiastes 9, verse 3. The heart of the sons of man is full of evil, and madness is in their heart while they live. And I have to say this because, man, as you see this technology, you have to scratch your head, at least I have. These people are flat out mad. Why would you want to do such a thing? Why would you want to mess with something so wonderful, which is our ionosphere, our protective atmosphere, our beautiful world? Madness has to be part of the equation. And also, Solomon said, is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It has already been told of old time, which was before us, and there is no new thing under the sun. Technology we're finding out now, at least in my research, it was had before. Okay, from the archaeological record that I call forbidden archaeology, we see evidence of a flood, a major covering of earth. We see in layers of the earth before the flood, we see a great difference in the flora and the fauna of the earth. We understand again from this greatest book ever written that men lived many hundreds of years. Something cataclysmic happened in the upper atmosphere to cause the canopy of vapor to change and cause a massive flood. Now, archaeologists that are honest will tell you this is fact. It's in the record, okay, and verifies the Bible's validity on this. Now, Ecclesiastes also says this warning: he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. And when I became aware of all of this technology, it was sorrowful. I thought, my heavens. Then again, the question becomes, what does it profit you to know it? You say, well, if we don't know something, how can we ever change? If you don't know what's wrong in your diet, your health. I have a doctorate in nutrition, and I counsel people all the time for nutrition to help them in healing. And they just don't know what's bad for them to stop the downward spiral. You have to have knowledge. You have to have understanding. And then you have to apply it. And let me share with you this last one, and then we'll move on. Ephesians 2, verse 2. This is a really important clue here. This is the Apostle Paul writing to the church in Ephesia. In times past, he wrote, you walked according to the course of this world. According to who? To the prince of the power of the air. The spirit that now works in the children of disobedience. And folks, this is where it really comes very clear and in focus to me personally. The prince of the power of the air. I'm going to show you where this all ties together and where you can take this to the bank, because it's fact. The prince of the power of the air is a real entity. It's a demonic presence. Some people call him Satan, but it's real. Very real. How many of you know what's going on tomorrow in Bonn, Germany? Anybody? Oh, there's one hand. Wow, that shows the power of the media to keep things silent. Remember what happened a few years back in Copenhagen? The climate. There was all of this on the internet. Well, it was all over the place. Even in mainstream media, they were talking about the climate summit in Copenhagen. Same thing happened here with a whole lot more at stake, starting tomorrow, June 3rd through the 14th. But I'm amazed people don't know what's going on. There's a reason why why Senator Kerry just replaced who I call the Ice Queen of Narnia, Hillary. There's a reason why. Kerry is a big-time mover and shaker in the field of climate change and carbon tax credits. Huge player. Huge player. He's going to be leading a massive charge starting tomorrow. Most people haven't even seen their new logo. United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Notice the laurel leaves, which is, again, symbolic of power and ruling elite. Look at the CC in the middle. That's convention, stands for climate change. But it's very symbolic to me even more than that because it represents the ozone holes that I'm going to be discussing in depth with you. Holes in the climate protecting ozone. So remember the term holes in the ozone when you think about this caption here, this new logo. I call it Climate Con, not in terms of conspiracy, but a confidence game. Climate Con is more an accurate description. But really, if I were making their logo, here's how I would design it. Agenda 21 with the Death Star. Because what I'm going to be talking about here is technology that's best described in the works of George Lucas's Star Wars. Literally a Death Star system of death rays. And I'm not talking science fiction now here, folks. This is real. Okay, I'm going to give you this one truth that this is an aha moment. You can just get up and leave if you want, because that's really what you need to know. Okay. This is a satellite image put out by NASA, but again, unless you have connections to this information, which has been leaked out from basically the UK, and Julian Assange and others, you don't know what's going on. A lot of top-rate scientists are trying to say quietly, come on, this is the big, big story. Okay, look closely at this image, and you see this looks like a landmass off to the north, the right. This is the big secret, folks. Let me get this moving. See right here? It looks like Greenland, doesn't it? But this is the North Atlantic. What you're seeing there is a massive zooplankton blossoming, and that's happening only in the last 20 or so years. It hasn't historically happened in the North Atlantic. Now, when plankton blooms in this massive volume, it has a kind of a short life cycle. It doesn't last a whole long time, and then it dies and starts decomposing. What happens when things decompose and die? They give off a gas. That happens to be a huge volume of gas. Conservative estimates say it's upwards of 1,000 times. I've seen different rates, but it's as much as 1,000 times more than all worldwide burning of CO2 gases in factories and cars, et cetera, et cetera. Now the question becomes, why haven't you seen this before? Why don't they want you to know this is what's happening there? This is the primary cause of excess greenhouse gases worldwide. The big secret is it's not the burning of fossil fuels. See, there's no profit in it for them to come out with carbon credits, again, following this Agenda 21. If you understand Agenda 21 and have read anything about it, going back again to the report from Iron Mountain, this is the culmination of that. Okay, I'm sorry, folks, but I think this is right up there, the number one thing you need to know about. Not to say the Federal Reserve and other problems, they're symptoms of a bigger problem. This is the huge problem. This is geoengineering because it affects everybody on this planet, not just Americans. It affects your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. It's your posterity we're talking about. It's our world, not their world. Now, To understand global warming, to understand climate change technologies, weather modification technologies, WMT, you need to understand just a very basic rudimentary, have an understanding of how weather cycles begin. This is a typical weather map. You got, of course, the northern, what's called the Tropic of Cancer. You have below that the Tropic of Capricorn. And, of course, everybody knows about the equator. Running around the equator is this belt. It's called the ITCZ, Intertropical Convergence Zone is what that stands for. Now, notice that along the ITCZ, this is your band of equatorial weather patterns. Along this band, you have the rainforests, you have all of the major storms, and typically when you talk about meteorology, the study of weather cycles and patterns, everything as far as the seasonal tropical moistures or whatever, they generate off of this ITCZ. Now notice all of the patterns of the prevailing winds, the westerlies here. Up the North Poles, you have different polar fronts, different wave patterns. But the most important thing you have to realize is typically, there's exceptions to every rule, but not too many exceptions on this one. You notice how everything in the northern hemisphere goes in a clockwise direction? It's important to understand that. Below the equator, everything goes in a counterclockwise direction. Do you know it's a fact that if you go down in South America and if you care about such things, if you watch the water draining in your sink or flush the toilet, it goes counterclockwise. Yeah, here in this northern hemisphere, it goes clockwise. Just watch it sometime if you have nothing else to do. Okay? Why this is important is this. Natural storms systems, you can see them, if you know what you're looking for on the Doppler radar weather maps, natural storms have a rotation clockwise. And here's the grand key. Man-made unnatural events go the other way. And I'll show you why that's true. They're manipulated. I'll show you why. Is that an aha moment? ABCs of weather, starting just, again, I don't want to get into technical details. I don't have a lot of time. We talk about air pressure. You hear about low pressure ridges, you'll hear about high pressure ridges. But air pressure is very real. Air has weight, and the movement of air generates the pressure. But here's the important point B. Temperature change, and just basically heating of water molecules, equals pressure change. And as pressure changes, the weather changes. That's what a storm front is all about. That's the most important basic ABC on weather. Understanding warmth, increases in gradients of air temperatures result in storm fronts. Very important, simple, basic point. Okay? Low pressure ridges, your air comes from the ground up. From the ground, as warm air rises, of course, it cools. The cooling air causes the water vapor to form in the form of precipitation. And then we have the electron transfers, which is commonly called lightning. All right? Pretty simple. Now, here is the important point you have to get through on this whole concept. What do you do when you put water in your microwave oven and turn on the button? Your microwave has an energy field that does what? It bounces beam around the water. The water does what? It gets hot, doesn't it? Can you boil water in a microwave oven? Oh, yeah, of course. What if you took the same technology of a microwave and focused it on certain areas of a front and heated up in specific areas? Can you manipulate water and storm fronts in that way? Well, logic says, heck yeah, you can. And you'll see by the technology and the patents that's exactly what's gone on and is currently going on. The NASA has a graph of the ionosphere. This is pretty fun. You have 0 kilometers where you start out with the land mass to 250 kilometers up. Up around 250 kilometers is where our space shuttles do their fun work. Up on that area, you have the reflected shortwave radio signals. These waves going in and out of the upper atmosphere are constant. Then about 150 kilometers up, according to NASA, you have the aurora borealis, the northern lights, and where most rockets, including ICBMs, would operate, okay? Then you have the ionized E layer, the D layer. This D layer is where things becomes dense and where meteors come in and they burn up. Thank goodness for that, right? Meteors just flash. And then, of course, in the upper, about 50 kilometers up, you have weather balloons, spy planes, etc. Now, follow this through. You have the troposphere, which is, again, where most chemtrails are being sprayed in the top of the troposphere. But you have something that most people don't know too much about, something called the magnetosphere. My goodness, those of you that are into Tesla technology, Tesla understood the incredible energy fields of the magnetosphere. We are just, we don't recognize this too often, but we are sitting here hurtling through space at a rapid speed. And we don't recognize that up around in the top in the magnetosphere, tremendous amounts of energy are being created and released. You can tap into that magnetosphere. There is no reason at all why we need to burn fossil fuels, period. But I want you to meet the late, brilliant, really genius, Dr. Bernard Eastlund. Here's his picture. He's an ordinary, average scientist working for NASA. But I tell you, as you read through his patents, oh my goodness, it starts to make a lot of clear sense. His main patent I want to discuss is simply titled Method and Apparatus for Altering a Region in the Earth's Atmosphere, Ionosphere, and/or Magnetosphere. Now this is right from his patent, and let me quote it. The radiation, we're talking about microwave radiation now, the radiation is transmitted at a frequency which excites electron-cyclotron resonance to heat and accelerates the charged particles. In essence, he's describing how a microwave oven works. This increase in energy can cause ionization of neutral particles, which are then absorbed as part of the region, thereby increasing the charged particle density of the region. What he's just describing here is how to manipulate and manufacture energy in the ionosphere that creates, again, the weather patterns. This patent is numbered, those of you that want to look it up, 468-6605, filed January 10th, 1985, assigned to a company called Raytheon. We're going to follow through and see what's happened to this patent with Raytheon. This is from Bernard Eastlund's private papers. He did do a bunch of lectures to select groups, not the least of which is a group called AIPAC, A-I-P-A-C. This is exactly how he presented it. He shows the microwave beam. This is not my diagrams, this is Eastlund's, creating what's an energy field of plasma patterns. These plasma patterns are then what's manipulated by a satellite beam and creates the weather systems. You'll see this in very complex graphics that he puts out. He reports in his presentation, quote, the Van Allen belts, which are the magnetosphere. The Van Allen belts capture charged particles, protons, electrons, alpha particles, and these spiral along the magnetic force lines toward the polar regions where the force lines converge. They converge in the polar north and south pole, but they also are responsible for that ICTZ, that convergence zone in the equator. Concentrated and directed microwave energy then superheats the charged particles, resulting in man-made storm fronts such as hurricanes and tropical depressions. This is in his patent information. Okay. Does that mean he knows how to do it, or are they really doing it? See, there's a difference. Well, Colorado State University at Fort Collins, Colorado, has a place called the Little Shop of Physics. Not the Little Shop of Horrors, but kind of close. They teach their budding students there what exactly is the intertropical convergence zone. They have a really neat little presentation that I think, it's called a Freudian slip, perhaps. They explain again how storm fronts form by studying the ITCZ. Here's what this is a direct quote from their teaching material. Quote, scientists launch satellites over 22,000 miles into space, which can send back pictures of weather features like the clouds of the ITCZ. So they study the ITCZ to see how the weather patterns form and then how they can manipulate them on a global scale. Because here's what they here's what they said, quote, sometimes the images that the satellites send back are visible light images like those from a camera, but other times they send back measurements of infrared radiation, temperature changes or gradients. Again, remember the temperature inversions, which is an indication of temperature, or, get this, or microwave radiation if a radar instrument is used. How do you tell if it's been used? I submit it's how it rotates. Because nature says it goes clockwise. Manipulation says if you alter that or create it yourself, you're going to go against those prevailing winds. You're going to have it go counterclockwise. Here's a satellite picture of the intertropical convergence zone. This is again going through, this is Panama, you see right there. This is in the tropics. These are storms that are constant, pretty much all the time. They see how they measure the patterns, the heat vectors, the jet stream. All of this goes into understanding how storms are formed. Now here's examples of NASA's satellites, both visible and infrared. This is the visible spectrum. This is Hurricane Katrina, right over our great state of Louisiana. And here is the infrared version. Notice, which way is that rotating? Look at the temperature gradients. Okay, there's a storm over the Intermountain area. This is Utah. These storm patterns, again, they typically come in and they rotate this direction. Okay, this one is going, and look at the gradients of okay, this is your heat, your hot temperatures, the Baja coast here, Gulf of Baja. Look at the patterns of hot water. Look at this pattern of hot water here. This is what causes natural hurricanes. I'm not saying that hurricanes aren't natural. They are natural. And it's again when the water in the Atlantic cools off, it spawns these. But again, they typically spawn going this way, clockwise rotation. Now here's a live shot of Hurricane Katrina coming in. See how it's clearly a counterclockwise spiral. Unnatural. Hurricane Katrina smiles for the camera. They're called GOES, geostationary operational environmental satellites. They are deployed and maintained and operated by a group called the NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA was formed in the year 1970 by Tricky Richard Nixon. And as you look at what they were really set up to do, in my opinion, it provides what's called compartmentalization. It's a way to keep even government agencies from knowing what the other one is doing and give them plausible deniability back and forth. I see this happening so much between NASA and NOAA. Okay, here's a graphic from, again, Bernard Eastland's presentation. Now, this is a typical thunderstorm in the Midwest. And what you see up here is what's called a solar-powered satellite, SPS. We'll talk about that in depth. But they're beaming a microwave beam. It's hard to read the actual graphic, but this is a microwave energy burst, just like its patent explains. And what it does, and this is now I really think Bernard Eastland was doing this for a reason to stop deadly tornadoes. And in reading his papers and his books, he thought, wow, I can do something here to make sure tornadoes don't kill anybody like they're doing now in Oklahoma. And the question is, why Oklahoma? Why has Oklahoma been so hammered lately? What has Oklahoma done to tick off the powers that be? I mean, Oklahoma City bombing to begin with, and now all this. No, see, if you hit again, if you hit the area where the hot air goes up, and if you hit it with a microwave on the cold side and heat that up, what happens is the force dissipates. It just dies. So he says, theoretically, this can control and kill any big thunderstorm, low pressure that has the ability to spawn tornadoes, killers, because you can stop it. Now the question is, if it can be stopped, and if NASA and Raytheon has this technology, logic dictates we should never have killer tornadoes in the Midwest. No, we're having more than ever. So the question becomes why? What's the motive? Who wants to know the motive? Or is everybody awake? Okay. All right. Okay, this is where it's going to, if you have seat belts, fasten them. Remember we talked about what you thought, what does Ephesians have to do with this? That Ephesians quote about the power of the prince of the air. Well, it's called the seance that changed the world. Because what you have coming out of NASA at the highest echelons, really, whether it's the Federal Reserve, the families, the bloodline families that control this, it all really focuses right here in this seance that changed the world. Let me share it with you. The date, December 31st, New Year's Eve, 1952. A group of 9 elitists hold a seance in a place called Glen Cove, Maine. If you look at the map of Maine, Glen Cove is right on the Atlantic seaboard. It's not too very far away from a place called Kennebunkport. Okay? And there's bloodline family connections to Kennebunkport. A follow-up seance is held on midnight, June 27th, 1953, also in the woods outside Glen Cove, Maine. And there, the name of these 9, what they identified themselves as watchers. So you have 9 watchers giving messages of direct importance to this elite occult 9. And these names are, if you go and you understand Egyptology, these are big names in the Egypt pantheon of gods and goddesses. Osiris, Isis, Nut, Nephthys, and Horus. Wow, I said, I don't know much about Egyptology, but this is interesting. They claimed in their seance that they were watching the earth from a mothership that's invisible, hovering above the earth. That's what they explained to the seance practitioners. But they did say that they would be bringing in what they called a new order. Where have we heard a new order before? And or what they called the New Age. Prince of the power of the air. Horus. Nephthys. Remember those names. Well, after these 9 identified themselves, a spokesperson came forth that has been directing them, according to this record, ever since. The goddess Nephthys. Nephthys really directs NASA, folks. And here's how it breaks down. She's the mother goddess of ancient Egypt, the goddess of the watchers. Again, this is explained in the book of Genesis in the Bible. They're recounted in the biblical Genesis as the sons of God, the race of giants that came down and basically spawned a group of giants on earth. And this is archaeologically, again, forbidden. Anytime that an archaeological dig comes up with a giant skeleton and a big skull and a cone head skull, it's hidden away right now. Why? There's 2 rows of teeth and 6 digits. That's how you know it's the spawn of Nephthys, which they called the Nephilim. Nephilim meaning the offspring of the mother goddess Nephthys. These were bloodthirsty, cannibalistic giants during the pre-Noah time of the earth, according to the Bible, and archaeological evidence now showing it too, the Nephilim. I come from Utah. I come from a Mormon. I used to be Mormon. They say I apostatized from Mormonism. I just left it because it didn't. I mean, come on. There's just some weird stuff going there. I got to tell you, the Book of Mormon, the central character theme is a man of great stature, a giant, if you will, and his hero name is Nephi. Joseph Smith translated, he said, the Book of Mormon from Reformed Egyptian. Really? Golly, the book of, you think it would come from Hebrew, if they were Hebrews that came from Israel. But, okay, I'll leave that alone. Outside of a place in Utah called Vernal, Utah, there is a huge petroglyph panel that I think is just fascinating. I photographed this so many times. Because here's what it shows. Hello. This is a real ancient carving. Now it's kind of, I don't know whether you can see that. See it okay? All right. Look at this gentleman. This is called the Bigfoot panel. It's a place called McConkey Ranch. They're just outside of Vernal, Utah. Notice the 6 digits. Count them. 6 fingers on both hands. Down here, it's a little hard to see, but here's the leggings. The 2 legs. This is looks like an Aztec or Incan type of individual. It's a little bit weathered, but you can see it. And this is a huge panel, folks. This is like 50, 60 feet high. It's an incredible panel with paint as well. The headdress. Notice the head of the cone head. Do your own research. Check out cone heads that are showing up. Giant cone heads. Okay. It's quite common, really. And then you see over here another smaller being, but the size, if this typical Aztec warrior comes up to about midriff right there, that's how big he is. And then you have what looks to me like an entheogenic Amanita muscaria mushroom. Well, Harley Megatron. Wow. Okay, I don't want to get off, but see, that shows evidence of this story, this Neph thighs. Now, I want to share with you who the human 9 are. I told you I'd name names. I'm not afraid of naming names. The human 9, here they are. Husband and wife, Henry and Georgia Jackson. Alice Bouvier. Does that Bouvier name sound familiar? Marcella DuPont. Carl Betts, Mary Bancroft, Arthur and Ruth Young, and Andrea Puharek. I saved the most notorious for last, really, in my book. The 9 folks are really a representative cross-section of the bloodlines, the American elite. And if you really follow their bloodlines, you see them represented in the Federal Reserve private bank system. You see them, they really have their hands in virtually everything that raises your eyebrows. Here's a picture of DuPont, Marcella DuPont. She's there. That's her there. She's, again, an heiress of the fabulously wealthy DuPont chemical clan. If you follow the money of DuPont Chemical, you see them really, they're the movers and shakers of big pharma in a major way. The DuPont Chemical Group. Now, Alice Bouvier, she's quite an interesting woman. She was born Ava Alice Muriel Astor, descendant of John Jacob Astor and the daughter of Colonel John Jacob Astor IV, who died aboard the Titanic when it sank. She was married 3 times. Her first husband was an officer in the Tsarist army, Prince Sergei Obolensky. Now, if you follow Sergei Obolensky, you find he's really pretty much linked with a dude named Rasputin. Okay, she's a mystic. I mean, this woman was from the very early ages, spent many times going over to Egypt and having seances there and in the Great Pyramid. She's an Egyptologist and claimed to channel Nephthys constantly. I think she was one of the major reasons why they had the seance, frankly. How about Arthur and Ruth Young? This is where it gets kind of really freaky. Arthur Young is shown here in a picture. His wife, Ruth Forbes Payne, yes, heiress of the Forbes family. Arthur Young was a famous inventor. He actually developed and patented the helicopter, the Bell helicopter. There he is developing the first prototypes of the helicopter. Arthur Young is really one of the financial and funding wizards for what they call the Nine. And his book, Consciousness and Reality, is really a moving force in this the New Age movement, as we call it. We can go into a whole other section. I'll leave that to my next speaker coming up to talk about JFK, because the daughter of Ruth Forbes Young actually has a central role to play in the JFK insanity. She was the sponsor in that for a guy named Lee Harvey Oswald. It was in her home. There's just, when you get up in that high level, some things really start to raise your eyebrows. Carl Betts, good-looking guy, isn't he, ladies? He's was an actor, a play. He worked on Broadway as an actor. He was involved romantically with one of the Nine. We'll explain to you who that is now, Mary Bancroft. You want to read somebody that's really interesting. Mary Bancroft's story. There she is. She has a book. It's called Autobiography of a Spy, Debutante, Writer, Confidant, Secret Agent. Whoa, yeah. She's the book, as I've read it, it's like, wow, what a story. We learned that, according to her biography, she was the shining star of the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, which later came into be known as today's Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. She was the mistress of Allen Dulles, romantically involved very much, and the book documents her incredible role with the Valkyrie assassination of Adolf Hitler. Now, the reason for that, as explained in the book, is her sympathies and her funding of the family to the research of the Nazis, Nazi scientists, is epic. And she didn't want to see the Russians get possession of this technology. So it was kind of, her role was to see if she can stop the war quicker by assassinating Hitler. And this is the whole reason that she's deeply involved in the Valkyrie assassination attempt. But after the war ended, she's a central figure in bringing 7,000 top Nazi scientists, including Werner von Braun and others, over to America, and it's something called Operation Paperclip. NASA really owes Mary Bancroft a huge debt of gratitude. Now, Andrea Puharich. Those of you that know anything about MKUltra, mind control experimentation, Andrea Puharich is the star. There he is. Look at the Pope. He doesn't know quite what to think about this guy. Puharich founded the Round Table Foundation, a research institute specializing in all kinds of subjects, cybernetics and ESP. Founded in 1948. The funding for the Round Table Foundation came primarily from his connection with Secretary of Agriculture, later Vice President Henry Wallace. Wallace was a high-ranking Freemason. served under FDR's administration, and he is the one responsible. You can thank him for putting the Great Seal with the Masonic capstone on the Federal Reserve note. That's his design. This is where it came from. Is that another aha moment? Now, Puharich's best friend and confidant is a guy named Jack Parsons. Both of them, ardent, died in the world, 110% disciples of a guy named Aleister Crowley. Here is Marvel Whitesides Parsons, as he was named, changed his name to John or Jack Parsons. In 1936, Parsons joined the Guggenheim Aeronautical Laboratory, called GALC, of the California Institute of Technology, where he worked under Frank Molina and Theodore von Karman, just down the road here in Pasadena. Do you realize that before each rocket test launch, Parsons would chant Crowley's sacred hymn to the Greek god Pan? The Greek god Pan is better known as the Prince of the Power of the Air, folks. In 1942, Parsons was chosen, specifically handpicked by Aleister Crowley, to lead the Agape Lodge of the OTO, the Order Templis Orientis in California. I don't want to go in. If you studied anything at all about Aleister Crowley, you know he self-described himself as the wickedest man on earth. Now get this. In 1946, Parsons and his partner at the time, L. Ron Hubbard, does that ring any bells? The founder of Scientology, participated in a work of high black magic, ceremonial magic, known as Babylon working. In the most Reader's Digest condensed version, Babylon working is the black magic ritual designed to summon in this dimension of reality. Now, Sonia talked about the different dimensions. We're talking about summoning the scarlet whore, also known as Nephthys. For what purpose? To produce the final Antichrist. These folks, these are the founders of NASA. Marvell Parsons. The original Rocket Man. Remember Elton John's Rocket Man song? Yeah, if you really understand what's encrypted in that Rocket Man song, it fits. Boy, does it ever fit. Rocket Man, Jack Parsons. Marvell. Parsons' dad was a captain, and he was literally called Captain Marvel. That's where we get the term Captain Marvel, by the way. Here we see Jack Parsons at the rocket launch site in a place called Arroyo Seco. The year was 1936. He was drawn here because this was a very mystical place, folks. The local Tongva Indians, Native Americans, in their tradition, they said it was a literal gate to hell. In fact, it's called Devil's Gate. There's a dam there. It was built in 1920 called Devil's Gate, the Devil's Gate Dam. This rocket launch in 1936 was held on Halloween, October 31st, 1936. This started the rocket culture. That first launch was held on All Hallows Eve, 1936. On this very spot where he's standing right now, Jet Propulsion's lab, JPL, was later constructed. Here's a picture of what they call the campus of Jet Propulsion Labs. Down there you see the San Gabriel Mountains in the background. And here's a better picture of an aerial view. See the kind of the bow-like structure right here? Where he held his first rocket launch on Halloween was right in the middle of this, what the Indians called Devil's Gate. According to Wikipedia's entry, Jet Propulsion Laboratories, JPL, is a federal-funded, taxpayer-funded research and development R&D center and is the primary NASA field center. JPL is managed by the nearby California Institute of Technology, CIT, Caltech, for NASA. The laboratory's primary function is the construction and operation of robotic planetary spacecraft, though it also conducts Earth orbit and astronomy missions as well. There's something that's it's a science fiction movie called Deep Space Nine, but it's also taken out of NASA's what they call Deep Space Network. Deep Space Nine has to do with that original 9 extraterrestrials, ETs, whatever you want to call them, that communicated with them back in 1952. Now, what about Raytheon? How many of you have heard of Raytheon before? Most people have. You know what it stands for? What Raytheon literally means? What's in a word, right? Raytheon literally means, folks, light or illumination from the gods. Early in World War II, physicists in the United Kingdom invented something they called the magnetron. That's a specialized microwave-generating electron tube. Raytheon's research on the magnetron tube revealed the potential to cook food, to heat food with this magnetron. So Raytheon's Percy Spencer invented the first microwave oven by discovering that magnetrons could rapidly heat the food. In 1947, they demonstrated the first microwave ovens called the radar range. How many old-timers out there remember those radar ranges? They were big, weren't they? Pretty big and massive and pretty doggone expensive, actually. And they did it first of all, for commercial use. Today, Raytheon is one of the top worldwide military industrialist defense contractors. Headquartered in a place called Waltham, Massachusetts, the company has approximately 72,000 employees worldwide. Annual revenues net after expenses of approximately US $25 More than 90% of Raytheon's revenues were obtained from military contracts. Not only that, but top secret military contracts. And it's now the 5th largest military contractor in the world, 4th largest in the United States. Now, in 2010, Raytheon made a little bit of news, a little bit of ripples in the news world. They developed something called Rapid Information Overlay Technology, a euphemism, an anagram for riot. Now, what riot does allows the user to track people's movements and even to, predict their behavior. And how do they do it? By mining the data from social networking sites, Facebook, Twitter, Gowalla, and Foursquare. Now, Raytheon claims they haven't sold this software to any private sector clients, but it has publicly admitted that they are sharing it openly with Homeland Security. Does that make you feel really warm and fuzzy? I'd almost rather it goes. All right. Got a lot to rush through here. And if I want to say, if you really want to get the full copy of this rather than making notes, I do have it on a CD-ROM. I have just a few of them available if you really want some. Also, you can go onto my blog, which is simply A True Ott, ATRUEOTT.com. And all this is downloadable there. Never a charge. We just give it away if you want it. Here's what you have to really. This is the meat of the timeline, the historical timeline of what's gone on. And if you're like me, you're saying these people are just crazy to do this. Where was Congress? Where were the people supposed to be watchdogging for us? They were just like non-existent. Ever heard of Project Argus in 1958? Anybody hands? Project Argus. 1958. That was a year before I was born, by the way. Between August and September of 1958, the U.S. Navy, get this, exploded 3 fission-type nuclear bombs up in the upper atmosphere, 480 kilometers above the South Atlantic Ocean. And then they detonated 2 hydrogen bombs only 160 kilometers over Johnson Island in the Pacific. So a total of 5 nukes were exploded up into our ionosphere. It was designed by the U.S. Department of Defense and the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission under the code name Project Argus. The stated purpose of Project Argus was to, quote, assess the impact of high-altitude nuclear explosions on radio transmission and radar operations because of the electromagnetic pulse, EMP, and to increase understanding of the geomagnetic field and the behavior of the charged particles in it. Hello? You're going to go up there and explode nuclear bombs to test the ionosphere? I mean, let's destroy a toy to see how it works. Let's just chop it to bits and see how we can put it back together again. The gigantic experiment created new magnetic radiation belts encompassing almost the whole Earth and injected sufficient electrons and other energetic particles into the ionosphere to cause what? Worldwide effects. This is all reported in the August 1961 edition of Kiesing's Historische Archive, a German publication, actually. Now, it wasn't just that they did. They also brought out and they deployed what they called a shield of 350 billion copper needles in the upper atmosphere. They're each 2.2 to 4 centimeters long, and they formed a belt 10 kilometers thick and 40 kilometers wide up in our upper atmosphere. Why? Because they said, well, telecommunications are impaired by magnetic storms and solar flares. They actually planned to add to the copper needles if it proved successful. Again, who is giving them the instructions to do this? This insanity does not come normally to the mind of a sane person, I submit. No, it comes from directions given through this Deep Space Nine, this group, NEFTIS. The plan was strongly opposed by International Union of Astronomers, absolutely. Then we have, just 4 years later, we have Project Starfish. 9th July 1962. They did more. This time a kiloton device at a really low altitude of 60 kilometers, and then followed up with 1 megaton and 1 multi-megaton for a several hundred kilometers height. They did more nuclear bombs in the ionospheric protection area there. Now, do the math. You got 5 in 1958. You got 3 more here in 1962. A total of 8 nuclear bombs in the atmosphere. How many of you have heard this before? Few people have. Good. I got to admit to you, until I began to do this research, I didn't know this. I began to follow this link, and I'm sitting here, holy mackerel. How did they get away with this? How was this not front page news? Well, let me go through it. Basically, what Starfish did, it lit up the entire mid-range equator area. Fijian sailor who witnessed the nuclear explosions, he told reporters on the record that the whole sky was on fire, and he thought it would be the end of the world. The only person coming out was a Queen's astronomer at the time, Sir Martin Ryle, in the UK, screamed about the dangers of this, but he was ignored. Okay, let me move on. Encyclopedia Britannica, the old edition, not the new ones. This has all been taken out of Encyclopedia now. The old 1970 edition had a full entry on what happened with Project Starfish. Saturn V rocket, 1975. It had a malfunction. The Saturn V rocket at 300 kilometers had an explosion. The burn there produced an extremely large ionospheric hole. The disturbance reduced the total electron content more than 60% over an area 1,000 kilometers in radius and lasted for several hours. Now, between 1975 and 1981, NASA and the U.S. military began ways to test this new phenomenon, meaning specifically poking holes in the ionosphere through deliberate experimentation. This was not accidental. They were doing it on purpose. Now we enter what I want to really focus on, solar-powered satellite project, the SPS 1968. Now this is where it really gets quite aha. The Congress mandated NASA to prepare an EIS, an environmental impact statement, on the project to be completed by June 1980, costing $25 million EIS. They didn't perform the EIS because they really didn't know what it would do. But the idea was to put, get this, a number of 66 solar-powered satellites over a 30-year period between a cost of $50 and $80 billion, and this is in 1968 dollars. Now, how do you get plausible deniability on this one? What's the insanity that they're trying to tell this to Congress? Well, they say it's going to be they're going to generate solar electricity at $3,000 per kilowatt hour. Do the math. That's expensive stuff. At the time, the entire project was 2 to 3 times larger than the whole Department of Energy budget. Department of Energy, what a joke that is, really. That was formed, if you remember back at the height of the Gulf oil crisis, to get us independent from Gulf oil, and it just kind of kept growing and growing and growing, and today we're still the same percentages of Gulf oil consumed. They've done nothing, really, but spend tax dollars. Now, a lady named Rosalie Bertel really blew the whistle. Need to give her a medal. She's no longer with us. She testifies, quote, early review of the solar-powered satellite project, the SBS, began in around 1978. I was on the review panel. Although this was proposed as an energy program, it had significant military implications. One of the most significant, first pointed out by Michael J. Ozeroff, was the possibility of developing a satellite-borne beam weapon for anti-ballistic missiles, ABM use. The satellites were all to be in a geosynchronous orbit, each providing an excellent vantage point from which an entire hemisphere could be surveyed continuously. It was speculated that a high-energy laser beam, get this, would focus as a thermal weapon to disable enemy missiles. Does that sound a lot like something called Star Wars? That's exactly what it is, Strategic Defense Initiative, exactly how it was changed. So Bertel explains that it morphed from, originally it was to put out satellite panels that would beam energy back to the Earth and create an alternative energy source. No, it actually went, she says it's an infrared radiation wavelength that's invisible and can be used as an anti-personnel weapon. Again, what I call the Tesla death ray. Now get this, she also said, as a psychological weapon, the SPS, the solar-powered satellite, was capable of causing general panic in the people. We're talking to get in the area of mind control here now, you see. And this is 1978. Okay, I'm just going to skip through this quickly. We've got a lot to go through. But the solar-powered satellites became eventually morphed into strategic defensive and SDI and Gwen towers. Now, this is where you have to get a handle on this one. Because of the top secret nature, they said, of the communications and, of course, the spies that may be coming around during the Cold War. This is still Cold War era. Jane's Military Communications publication in 1978 said there had to be a new method of creating a communications network. So they developed what's called the GWEN system, Ground Wave Emergency Network. The system contains 6 radio subsystems created with a visible light using a dark beam. A dark beam, not visible, because the dark beam would not interfere with radio and television signals. Now, these dark beams, according to Ms. Bertel, she says it led to the formation of energetic plasma in the atmosphere, these dark beams. Kind of like the pharmaceutical thing, you know, there's side effects of everything you try and mess with. This is one of the side effects. The dark beam may have started out okay as a means to defend our country, but they found, oops, it's causing plasma, energetic plasma, which is a nasty thing because energetic plasma kind of starts eating away the protective ozone, okay? Whew. Now here's where it gets a little interesting. This became the formation of the Ground Wave Emergency Network, the GWEN and the GWEN Towers. This is only in America. This is not anywhere else in the world. Don't you feel really good and happy we only have GWEN, nobody else has it? The Orbit Maneuvering System. Now again, now we're entering into the space shuttle, our wonderful space shuttle missions. Now, the place where I live in Ogden, Utah, actually just a little north, is a place called Brigham City. And there's a factory there, a ammonium perchlorate rocket manufacturing facility. And I've toured that a number of times. It's quite amazing. It's now defunct because the space shuttle has been put in mothballs. Let me tell you why it's put out in mothballs. One of the shuttle experiments up there in the upper atmosphere was by injecting gases in their system to manipulate, to move the shuttle in the upper atmosphere without oxygen. They found that they could create holes in the ozone, holes in the protective layer of the ionosphere, and began to experiment this. They made big holes over Millstone, Connecticut. Millstone, Connecticut. Remember what we just heard in Sonia's presentation, Small Storms? Look where Millstone's at. Boy, it's right there. And Arecibo, Puerto Rico. It's a major facility, a HAARP facility that you don't even know about in Puerto Rico. Well, we go on. This is OMS burn. It shows you what happens in the space shuttle. A little technical. We'll skip over that. Okay. This OMS release over Connecticut in August 1985 produced an airglow over Newtown, Connecticut. I think there's a definite link going on here. I don't know about you, but coincidence? No. 400,000 square kilometers, a hole. Now, during the 1980s, rocket launches globally numbered about 500 to 600 a year. With 1989, the year 1989, there was 1,500 of them. Now, when you add the rocket fuel, and then you look at each shuttle flight injected 75 tons of ozone-destroying chlorine into the atmosphere. And then with the higher and deeper payload starting after 1992, there was actually 187 tons of chlorine. Ammonium perchlorate residue is chlorine. And what chlorine does in the stratosphere, it starts to eat away at the ozone layer. Now, I'm a chemist that knows just enough to be dangerous. And here's what I know. Barium oxide and aluminum oxides, other chemicals neutralize chlorine. They make it inert. Folks, when you understand what's happening in the ozone layer, the protective layer, now you understand why they have to covertly go up and spray chemtrails. It's like, well, here's a side effect, here's another drug to help fix the side effect. Now, why don't they just be honest and tell the people what they're really doing? Why do we have to come to conspiracy conferences and listen to crazy guys tell you about it? We all know about HAARP, right? I don't want to tell you any more that you don't know. Most people know about HAARP. There's a lot of information generated. This is actually, and this is again on the CD, if you want to review it, this is from the official government explanation of what HAARP does. They say it's there to communicate with submersed submarines, but they also say it conducts geophysical probes to identify and characterize natural ionospheric processes so that techniques can be used to mitigate or control them. It's another saying it's weather control. Now, produces high amounts of high-frequency energy. If you go back to Miss Bertel's explanation of whistleblowing, what she's talking about is these high-frequency energy beams that can cause mind control. It can. The question is, has it? Will it? Okay? All for Department of Defense purposes. All right. The final thing that the official government agency says about HAARP, it produces what's called oblique heating. To produce effects on radio wave propagation, which again, microwave energy is radio wave, thus broadening the potential military applications of ionospheric enhancement technology. Ionospheric enhancement technology is another euphemism for weather control technology. Okay, this is in their own publications, and if you cross-reference that with Bernard Eastland's patents and his papers, it becomes crystal clear what they're talking about here. Most people have heard of HAARP, but what about Poker Flats? That's a huge area. It's actually got more rocket launches out of Poker Flats than Cape Canaveral. Now that's in the northern hemisphere, just north of Fairbanks, Alaska, established in 1968. Again, operated under NASA and Jet Propulsion Labs contract. In March 1989, 2 Black Brant X's and 2 Nike Orions were launched south over Canada. What were they doing? They were releasing radioactive barium at high altitudes and measuring how much chlorine the ozone-eating chlorine was being eaten up. This was the first test to see what kind of chemtrails to be put out. Now, weather modification technology today. I'd be highly surprised that many people have seen these pictures. You ever seen this little thing right here? This is a picture taken actually down in San Diego. It was there for just a short period of time. This is called the Seabase X-Array, the SBX, docked for resupply refueling in San Diego. The SBX 006 platform has 6 3.6 megawatt diesel generators. When all 6 generators are turned on, the SBX is a 21.6 megawatt capacity. By comparison, the HAARP installation only has 3.6 megawatt. This is 6 times greater and more powerful than HAARP. Chances are you've probably never heard of this. Probably don't know that there are 5 of these deployed. And Raytheon is the contractor. Look at this thing going out to sea. Doesn't that look like something you see on James Bond 007? You know, I think I saw something like that in The Spy Who Loved Me or something. I don't know. It's crazy, folks. Here's the parameters. The sea-based, X-based SBX system is a fleet of floating HAARP microwave arrays. It's a self-propelled floating wave-generating station specifically designed to operate in high winds and heavy seas. It is an integral part of the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, operating under the Defense Department. It's mounted, it's pretty good in engineering complex here. It's a 5th-generation Norwegian-designed, Russian-built CS-50 semi-submersible twin-hulled, self-propelled oil drilling platform. Woohoo! The fleet is based out of Adak Island in Alaska and can be moved quite rapidly, deployed on its own power any place in the Pacific Ocean. Now, it was the deployment of the SBX there that really, I think, caused the tsunami and the Fukushima problem. Again, how do I prove it? Well, you just got to know where it was deployed and where it was stationed when all that insanity happened. Okay, let's move on. I want to leave some time for questions. I call SBX HARP on steroids. I mean, because you got 5 of these things, each one 6 times more powerful than HARP. And yet, for the people that should be researching this and knowing, I've talked to many on the phone, and they just don't know about it. They have no idea what it's all about. And so it just shows you how effective the controlled media is in keeping a secret. In 1976, here's, again, everything that I'm talking about as far as the documents are on the CD-ROM. I suggest you get a copy of this one thing, if nothing else. To those skeptics out there, the United Nations in 1976 issued a weather weapons treaty, a conference. Man, if you read that, okay, let's use some logic. The treaty reads, quote, recognizing that scientific and technical advances may open new possibilities with respect to modification of the environment, recognizing, however, that military or any other hostile use of such technologies could have effects extremely harmful to human welfare. Really? Desiring to prohibit effectively military or any other hostile use of environmental modification techniques in order to eliminate the dangers to mankind from such use, and affirming their willingness to work towards the achievement of these objectives. Quote, each state party to this convention undertakes not to engage in military or any other hostile use of environmental modification techniques. And then they define environmental modification techniques. Refers to any technique for changing through the deliberate manipulation of natural processes. Natural processes, like I showed in that first natural weather map, the dynamics, composition, or structure of the Earth, including its biota, lithosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere, or of outer space. 1976. What would cause the United Nations to call a worldwide conference to debate this? A conspiracy theory? Or something threatening this planet like nothing ever has before? Now, I want to say with this one, please, I just call it like I see it. Who could be doing this funding and doing this covertly? The United States signed off on this. Let me share with you something. 76 nations signed off on this treaty. The list of nations is alphabetical. It's on my CD-ROM. And here's the website to check it out. Here's the relevant portion of the list, signing nations. You see Iceland, May 18th, 1977. Iran, May 18th, 1977. Iraq, that terrible Iraq. Crazy Saddam Hussein, August 15th, 1977. Lebanon. There's nothing between Iraq and Lebanon. No Israel. Why not? They're our allies. Why are they not on this important treaty? Folks, it's not just this one. There's something called nuclear inspection and disarmament treaties as well. Do you realize that one of the most covert nuclear facilities in the world is a place called Dimona in Israel? They specialize in mini nukes. They don't sign any treaty to have their nukes registered and logged in and categorized and inspected. I appreciate the presentation yesterday about the truth about 9/11, that it was a nuclear bomb, a series of them. Absolutely no doubt about that. But nobody's asking this question. Where did you get a nuke bomb from? Huh? Is that a fair question? Or should we not even be asking that question? You just don't go out in the black market and pick up a nuke. A fission-type nuclear bomb, the specialty that's what they do in Israel. But nobody knows because nobody has inventory, nobody has accountability. And I'm sorry, it's not being anti-Semitic or anything to declare that. It's something that needs to be exposed and talked about because it affects everything as far as our paradigm. Well, Bernard Eastland, strong ties to Israel. He's a Jewish gentleman. Homer Newell, Associate Administrator of NASA. On the CD-ROM is a full report in 1966 he issued to Congress called a Recommended National Program in Weather Modification. He's the director of this program at NASA, 1966, strong ties to Israel. And Mr. Rothschild, Evelyn Rothschild, LLC, today controls Weather Central. I told you I'd name names. I don't care if it's popular or not. Why is Rothschild... Thanks. Here's Rothschild's quote, and I'll wrap this up. When he made the press release that he now controlled and purchased and owned Weather Central, he says, as a family, the Rothschilds have always been dedicated to the utmost quality of our products and services. With respect to our investments, we focus on entering into long-term partnerships with people who share our values. As weather becomes more extreme around the planet, with greater human and financial ramifications, we believe that Weather Central will play a major role in mitigating damage and improving lives. Oh, really? This is important to the Rothschilds as it is to Weather Central. We are proud of our new partnership with them. So here's the $666 million questions. Why would the Rothschilds be so interested in owning the largest and most recognized weather modeling organization on the planet? Why would E.L. Rothschild, LLC, wish to have the controlling interest in the world's leading provider of interactive weather graphics and data services for television, web, and mobile phone apps that they don't charge to do this for the most part? Why? My answer is simply because when you are involved in playing God, when you're involved in controlling the weather, you must, of necessity, have the forecast models to cover your tracks. It's imperative that you have that. Conclusions. Here's what I want to just wrap up with. Fact. They held a convention, the United Nations did in 1976, an International Treaty on Weather Modification Technology. I asked the question, would the United Nations sponsor nuclear treaties if nukes were fictional? Think about it. The fact that our ally, Israel, refused to be a party to this treaty, to me speaks volumes, because if you're not with us, you're against us. You should be a part of this thing, and you should be held accountable for it. I just want to know why they haven't. Now, whoever controls the weather, think about it, is very literally playing God. And by doing so, is usurping God's creation, because this planet Earth is such an incredibly beautiful, wonderful thing. Why are you going to play around with it and mess with it? You know, if it's perfect, if it's beautiful, if it's wonderful, as it is, it's only insanity to play around with it. Just like gun control, folks, and if you don't miss this, of all the things I can say here, weather control, like gun control, is a misnomer. It's not about that. It's about people control. It's about controlling us. Our mental, our psychological, and everything else is where it's at. So final conclusions. NASA was founded and still to this day directed by covert mystics who are indeed receiving their marching orders from channeled interdimensional alien presences. which are best described as minions of the prince of the power of the air. Truth, folks, I know because I'm true, is stranger than fiction oftentimes. What actually is NASA? I'll leave you with this. I say NASA should be renamed Nephthys and Satan's Agenda. So that's it. Thanks for listening. It's the war against creation, really. Here's my website.
What'd you think of that?